We all go through life searching to discover who we really are. When we look within, we gain perspective into who we really are. Who were our ancestors? Those men and women upon whose shoulders we stand. Conversations on Race is a podcast that celebrates the inspirational voices of those who are on a journey towards self-discovery through dialogue, scholarly research, and education. Let's enjoy our uniqueness, make strengths of our weakness. Every episode of Conversations on Race will explore a true life story through the lens of a unique family history. Any questions about DNA, genealogy, census data, and oral history? Join us. Send us your questions. Post your comments on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter at Patty Maria McGee, the inspirational voices we hear on this journey called life. Conversations on Race with Patty Maria McGee, who we really are.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Patty Maria McGee, and I am your host today. We have a wonderful lineup for you. We have an amazing guest. Her name is Dr. Lundon Jackson, who's taken the time out of her busy schedule to be with us. I want to introduce you to our co-hosts. We're going to start with our friend Inaj Leoto. She is an attorney, and she is a world traveler, and she is a reader. She has an amazing ability to read and comprehend information, and she reads every book that's out there. So welcome, Inaj.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm going to cooperate. Patty wants everybody to know that my name was Jane, and I had a midlife crisis and flipped it backwards to Inaj. And like I said, name is about the only unilateral power we have as Black people. So go Inaj.
So thank you, Inaj. And then our co-host, Dr. Margaret Noor. She's all the way, she used to be a San Francisco treat. Now she's a Georgia peach. She left us from California, now in Atlanta. Dr. Margaret Noor is author of My Beloved Journey and Sister Extraordinaire.
Well, thank you very much, Patty, and our guests and co-hosts. Yes, I am the author of My Beloved Journey, Faith, Family, Fortitude. Was a San Francisco treat. Yes, now a Georgia peach, but I just like to say I spread the love. So I'm everywhere and here to serve. Looking forward to today's podcast. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. And our friend, my cousin and everybody's friend, Dr. Noelle Mubira, who is also joining us. She's the author of Serving. Go ahead and tell them the name of your book, because there it is.
This is my Vanna Black, Serving Your Way to Success, and several ebooks. I am an author and a speaker, and as well have a lot of science background with an electrical engineering degree. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today, expecting just great things with Dr. Lundon. She's one of those hidden figures, I can tell.
Yeah, and then I also want to say that my cousin is also a UN ambassador in the area of peace. So thank you for that, cousin. And then we have our technical guru, Sharon Wright. She is going to keep us on track today. Hi, Sharon. Thank you for everything. And our special guest host today is Dr. Angelo Williams. He is a friend, he is a colleague, he is currently Chief of Staff to the California Assembly member who runs the whole Democratic caucus. He is also a professor of African American Studies and Sociology for the University of California system, for the California State University system, as well as California's community colleges. So welcome, Dr. Williams. We get a male perspective and all of that. We're lucky to have you and your beautiful wife and your amazing little baby. Yes.
Thank you, Patty.
Well, let's get to it. We have our wonderful guest, Dr. Lundon Williams. She's been so patient. I've been such a technical dummy this week, and she's been so thoughtful and kind. So I met Dr. Jackson through Dr. Williams when she gave a presentation at the California State Legislature on financial aid. For 10 years, Dr. Williams and I have worked in policy making, trying to help more African-American youth access free money for college. And then it turns out that Dr. Lundon Jackson had already done a lot of this research and had actually written a book. So we are going to share that book information with you today. Dr. Jackson, I've watched from afar because she has this incredible life. She travels all over the world. She got married in, I think, Washington, D.C. in this beautiful location. And she just has so much to share. So I'm going to give you the floor, Dr. Jackson, and we just want to know all about you, where you're from, what your background is, what led you into your career, and how you got to be one of the most highest ranking women at Google dealing with the virtual economy of content creators on YouTube.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and I'm very happy to be here. It's kind of an eclectic story. I was born in Oakland. That's kind of my anchor point. But let me actually step back. My family were a part of the Great Migration out of the South. So my dad came from Oklahoma, my mom from Arkansas. And they both ended up in Oakland with a lot of our family and created a community there. Then we moved to Sacramento when I was 5 years old. And so moved there right when our neighborhood was kind of making this change and they wanted something, I guess, better for me. And so we were able to move to Sacramento. And that was probably the first experience of having a home in the suburbs and having the opportunity to go to a private school where I went there from 1st to 8th grade as one of the only Black kids there. Went to Kennedy High School, graduated from there, and then a triple alumni from Sac State. So Sacramento is very much my home base. After graduating with my bachelor's degree, I became a teacher and I followed in my mother's footsteps. And she was assistant superintendent in what used to be known as Grant Unified School District. She was a principal and then became superintendent. So I definitely followed her pathway. And I became a teacher there for the first time in '99 and spent 3 years there, then went off to St. Hope right when I was beginning at Sac High. And then I taught at Sac City Unified, Natomas Unified, and then I ended up at Twin Rivers when they did the whole consolidation and was kind of a teacher leader working in the district office there. From there, I wanted to get out of the classroom and I always kind of bookend my teaching career. I started teaching the year of Columbine and I ended the year of Sandy Hook. Those are my bookends of teaching. And that was really one of the main reasons why I left the classroom. I honestly just didn't feel safe. I worked in a continuation school with quote unquote, those kids, tattoos, everything else. And I did not feel safe, not because of them, just in general, just the teaching world, I didn't feel safe. Had an opportunity to move to the East Coast with my now husband, because I knew I wanted to get out of the classroom, but I didn't know what that meant. And I had a lot of great opportunities where I was able to join a tech company and really climb the ladder really fast. But I walked into that position of, I had to start on the bottom of the ladder to prove myself, because that's just how it is for some folks. And I was able to climb that ladder really fast. And then after 2 years being there, Google recruited me. And I ended up coming over to Google, and then I'm now at YouTube. So it's kind of an eclectic experience, but definitely the common theme is really about education. I've done it at K through Gray, and now I do it globally for about 10 billion users a year.
Wow. That's amazing. So tell us, what does that mean? I mean, most of us, the internet is very mystified, it's like mysterious. So when we were talking before, you were telling me about this whole content creator economy that's so invisible to us. What do you do? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, when you think of YouTube or Facebook, Reels, Snapchat, TikTok, that is a huge economy, so much so that when tech companies talk about their profit margin or the value that they bring to an area, these companies actually bring it down to, we bring in X amount of dollars to an entire country.
Mhm.
So when you think of TikTok, their content creators get paid X amount of dollars for every post that they bring. They might get branding opportunities and so forth. There's a large chunk of people that now do not have to work the traditional 9-to-5 setting. They can make tens, 50, thousands, millions of dollars each year, each month, by just going viral. And so what my role is kind of creating that education to help as many people get to that level of being able to monetize their content.
Wow, we're so blessed to have you. Okay, we want to know the secret.
Can't share too much. I don't want to get fired. I gotta.
I hope we're on the right track. We're just trying to create some organic content and help people know that there are options to work in that 9-to-5. I mean, I think for most of us, it would be a dream to one day turn on your computer and you have 10 million followers and suddenly you're just getting free checks. So is that how it works? Can you do it with 10 followers, or do you have to have, these enormous Kim Kardashian numbers in order to retire?
Yeah, it is a journey. I mean, obviously, the average folk, it's the goal is to try to go viral, and you never know why people go viral. It could be because of a dance, it could be because of just a comedic sketch, it could be just all over the board. I mean, if you ever kind of get into this habit of going through content, you can kind of see it across the gamut. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting as many retweets, likes, followers, subscribers, all that good stuff. And when you get to a certain point, that's when the businesses come to you and they're like, I just need you to sell coffee for me, or just show coffee in the background. That's where the money comes in. So all of these companies, we try to work with our creators to help them monetize their account. And monetize is meaning getting those brands to kind of sell for you or sell for them.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Well, I know our co-hosts have some questions. So let's start with you, Dr. Williams, since you are the reason why we're all here together. You brought Dr. Lundon Jackson to the state legislature. She presented to those members, and we encouraged them to take her advice. Go ahead.
Now, everybody knows the reason why Dr. Jackson is here is Patty, because Patty is a super maven, right? She knows everybody, wants to talk with everybody, wants to connect with everybody. But welcome, Dr. Jackson. So good to see you, sis. And so obviously amazingly proud of your success. A part of your career that is not often, maybe you don't talk about it, or it's just kind of underneath, is that you're a scholar. Your dissertation, your book. So can you talk to folks about, first of all, how you built that discipline around research and writing, but also all of the possibilities. And I don't know if you're doing this or not. Hopefully you can tell us something that hasn't been said before, but are you planning on publishing more? Are you planning on writing more? I just think that's one of the most distinctive areas of your portfolio, is that you're a scholar, you're a published scholar.
Thank you. When I started the doctorate program, and that's how I met Dr. Williams. He was cohort 1, I was cohort 3. And just a side note, he made a note or a point to reach out to folks. And I still have the book that he provided me on how to write your dissertation. And it's very heavily written. We shared over a glass of whiskey. And he gave me some best tips, and I was able to write that and finish it as I was supposed to. But when I had the opportunity to get my doctorate degree, we had the choice between going K-12 route or community colleges. At that point, I was definitely K through 12. That had been my teaching experience for the past, previous decade. But I had kind of sat back and I was like, okay, what do I want to put my stamp on? Like, this is the dissertation. This is the thing that can leapfrog me to not necessarily get out of education, but get me into a different arena. And so I followed the money, financial aid, student aid. That is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And that was really the crux of why I chose to go the community route role, but also why I chose to do research on student aid. I'm in Gen X, where I never really had to get financial aid because I did go to school locally. I was right at that point before tuition went really high. So I never had that burden of student aid, but I did go to a community college. And I always tell people that out of all the degrees I got, my degree from Sac City was the hardest to get. It took me 6 years to get an AA degree. It took me 3 years to get a doctorate degree.
Wow.
And it was because of so many different things, like, working full-time, taking care of my father because he was sick, trying to be grown and living on my own because, I come from this generation, you turn 18, get out the house and figure it out. So it was that writing about student aid, even though I didn't have it, the research behind it was so close to home because I know so many people that want to have access to higher education, but financial was always the issue. Whether they got the financial aid or not, it became that barrier. If you got it, you don't know what to do with the money, or it wasn't enough money, or you still had to work and it still delayed your walking across the stage. And so I just took that opportunity just to kind of deep dive and talk about how student aid can actually impact graduation rates for community college students, following the money. And so I had the opportunity where I was trying to kind of get this brand once I got my doctorate degree, because I still say it, I was a teacher for 12 years. That's my nucleus of who I am, but there's so much more to me. And so I had to figure out what my brand is going to be. And so that's kind of looping back to answer your question, is the research was really about, one, getting this important subject out there, but talking about it from a different lens, other than people are getting money, what are they doing with it? But more of like, how does this money actually take people to the next level to walk across that stage? I still would go to conferences, I would write articles. It was really about trying to network, because I knew that because I was a teacher for so long and wanted to leave the classroom, it was hard to use those translatable skills into a different industry. And so that was like my way of just kind of getting myself out there, building that brand. And I had an opportunity to kind of use my dissertation and turn it into a book. Probably 10 people bought it, but it was like something that was a huge accomplishment for me, because it was just kind of a fulfillment of that original decision I made of wanting to really talk about this subject and how it really impacts the people that I knew, and what I found from doing all the research as well. And I still do a lot of this research in my field. In fact, that's probably one of the main reasons why I've been able to move up the corporate ladder so fast, because I come from able to apply what I talk about, but more importantly, I'm able to bring in the evidence, bring in the research, bring in the theoretical frameworks. I'm not just talking out of the side of myself, but really coming in with the facts. And when I speak to my leaders, and when I'm talking about why I want to be promoted or why this role is so important, that foundation of research is so important, and actually is very valued in this world.
Thank God. We just came from an era where research and science didn't matter, and it is so important. Now, Dr. Margaret Norris is also a K-12 educator with her PhD in, I believe, educational leadership or something. But Dr. Norris, what are your thoughts? What do you have to say to Dr. Jackson?
Well, Dr. Jackson, your story really resonates with me in so many ways. I particularly appreciate how you described your years and benchmarked your years in education from Columbine to Sandy Hook, and that you spoke about safety being a factor. I had a similar experience. And so when we speak about safety and we translate that now into the virtual world, Google to YouTube and all. And when I see you, I see a beautiful Black woman, beautiful woman of color. I think about our girls of color. And my question is, what advice would you give to our girls of color around feeling safe and secure as they navigate their way through uncharted territories? Because certainly the world that you now occupy, the space that you occupy, is uncharted territory. You are a trailblazer. So I'd like to know what you would pass on to the successive generation, particularly those of the girls.
You know, it's probably the same advice I had even as a teacher, because I was the only Black teacher, only Black woman science teacher, only woman science teacher a lot of the times. So that, I don't even want to call it a burden, that privilege of being that person in so many lives. It really comes down to, one, trust your gut. And what I mean by that is that there's this assumption that Black girls, Black women walk into these situations not having like a blank slate, like they have never had these experiences before. They've had them. People may have not have acknowledged it. They've been in these unsafe situations before and they've been able to figure it out, or maybe not, unfortunately. But I think it's really about understanding that the experiences that you have and experience that you probably will face, because that's the reality of the world we live in, are real, that your feelings about it are valid. But the third is to not let them break your spirit, to keep moving on. And that term, don't let them break your spirit, comes from my mother, who always told that to me. I went to a private school, first to 8th grade, where I was one of 4 Black kids out of 200 kids maybe. And the microaggressions were constant. I didn't understand it, but I understood it. But coming home and crying because someone said a joke, or my hair was a certain way, or you know how your parents like make perfect Afro puffs, and when you get home, it's like all over the place. Because that, and people would make fun of me because of that. My mom always told me, don't let them break your spirit. Don't let them break your spirit. And so that's probably the number one thing I say to this day. When I was a teacher, even the few Black folks that I work with, or ICs on my team, or just interacting within that ecosystem, I listen to what they're experiencing. I want them to learn from it, but also at the same time, how are you going to use that to take it to the next level? Whether it is, how are you going to deal with it when this happens again? Because it will. Don't let these people like break your spirit in a way where it starts to make you doubt yourself and who you are and what you can accomplish. So I think that's the number one thing that I say. Just don't let them break your spirit. Keep it moving. You are your ancestors' best dream. So keep it moving.
Now we have Inaj Leoto on, and she brought to our planning meeting a front cover of Ebony magazine, which was honoring Black women in STEM. Inaj, tell us what you were feeling when you saw that magazine cover, and let Dr. Jackson know your feelings.
I don't have it with me right now, it's downstairs, but when I first saw it, and this is my first time coming to this, I was under the impression that, oh, we're going to hear about STEM and whatever. So I was going to be super prepared, and I was kind of really happy that the focus wasn't just on beauty, that they've always done the HBCU beauty queens. And this time it was beauty and brains. And I read the teenager stories, and oftentimes they talked about the hidden figures, that the role models. And since Katherine Johnson, her name came up, Dr. What's the plaything? Doc Steffens, some toy? Doc
McSteffens.
Happens, it's some toy, but they were just so impressed because they saw themselves. Mae Jemison's name came up, but they just feature 10 beautiful brilliant young women and what they're doing. One girl is 12 years old and interning at NASA. I mean, they're just, brilliant young women. So I was just happy to see that. But I do have a question. After listening to your powerful message, I'm kind of reminded of a quote by Malcolm X that talks about education being a passport to the future. And because I saw what your dissertation was about, financial aid, I have a question in that arena. Due to the racial and gender wealth gap, we know that Black women take on a larger proportion of debt or financial aid to, further their education. And it seems that Biden, now that he's president, has put the cancellation of debt way on the back burner. So my question to you is, what would you propose as some solutions to address this crisis and this disparity for sisters who want to continue their education but not come out owing so much money that they're never going to get ahead?
Yeah. Oh, that's a loaded question. That's a big question. I think it's almost a top-bottom approach. Bottom approach or bottom up is financial literacy. Like, we need to have that K through 12 just to prepare folks of like, what is the ROI behind getting a degree? What are your different pathways? What makes the most sense? When you're offered these loans, how do you read the fine print? How do you do that long-term math, but also just understand all the various programs that are out there? I think that's the number one key, because when you think about it, you have to be 18 years old to get a tattoo, but you can be 18 years old and sign up for 17 years old and get a $200,000 student loan. So that's a huge gap that we have. Financial education is not required in most states in the United States, and it's for a reason. The other approach is really thinking about, it's almost from a policy standpoint. It's hard to convince folks to make these decisions based on who's being impacted, because we know that at the end of the day, I don't want to say they don't care, but it's not a priority. But the fact of it is, if it was any other industry, this would be highway robbery, it would be extortion, it would be just bad banking, bad policy, just bad math. There is no reason for someone to sign up for a $10,000 loan, pay the minimum on time for 3-5 years, and end the day owing $60,000. Mm-hmm. That just is not, it should not be legally okay.
It's legal and it's profitable.
It's legal,
and that's why.
Yeah.
So we have 2 minutes left with this segment of the show. We're going to be continuing with Dr. Jackson in part 2 of the show. We have about a minute, and because my cousin, Dr. Mubaira, has worked at NASA, is an electrical engineer, and is a woman in STEM, I'm hoping to get at least one question in from you before we go on to part 2, because part 2, we're going to talk about Dr. Lundon Jackson's journeys around the world and have more conversations on race. Oh,
I don't know if I can fit it in a minute or two.
Okay, we can hold it off till the next show.
Race.
We'll come back to you in part 2. We're going to ask you to send in your comments, questions, stories. You can follow us on Conversations on Race. We have our new YouTube channel now. So can you go ahead and take us out of this show, Sharon, and then bring us back to part 2?
I sure can. Here we go.
Join us. Send us your questions. Post your comments on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter at PattyMariaMcGee.com. Conversations on Race is a podcast that celebrates the inspirational voices of those who are on a journey of self-discovery through dialogue, scholarly research, and education. Conversations on Race.
Okay, Thank you. We are back with part 2 of our program, Conversations on Race with Dr. Lundon Jackson. We have our co-host, Dr. Margaret Norris, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. Our co-host, special co-host today, Dr. Angela Williams. We have our friend and our co-host, Inaj Leoto, and my cousin and our co-producer on this show, Dr. Noelle Mubaira, who is a woman in STEM like Dr. Jackson. So cousin, in our last program, we didn't get to your question. So we're going to start off with your question for Lundon Jackson.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. It's amazing the path that your career has been able to take. You really must be a thought leader. Looking forward to seeing and reading some of your work. And I've been doing some research of my own around the world of content creating. It's making Forbes magazine, anything upwards of 10K of in subscribership, can start to bring some checks in. And I had a channel on Periscope, just around twice a week, just around different topics along the lines of my book, along the lines of just my life experience. And as I looked into content creating on YouTube, I found there seems to be some disparities in the rates that some content creators are paid versus others. So it seems to be divided along racial lines. Could you speak to that?
I can definitely speak probably more broader, meaning I think it's not an isolated event. I think we see it even probably in every industry you can name, honestly. Whether it's the entertainment industry or movies, actors, lawyers, I think that is just a systemic issue in every industry where POCs, women of color, are not paid, not brought to the forefront overall. So it's one of those things where I can't really speak too much on that side of the YouTube house or Google house, because I'm more of in the writing the content part of it. But I think just as, looking at the industry and doing the competitive analysis and things like that, and also just living in this world, it is a systemic issue. You name the industry, we're underpaid, we're undervalued.
Dr. Jackson, before we go on, I want to switch gears because this is a whole nother show. And what I would love is if you could talk about, because the title of the show is Conversations on Race, and you are in an interracial marriage. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us about your love and your life and what it's like for you dealing in that world of having an interracial relationship, interracial marriage? How is that as we have this conversation on race? Because all women want to find love. All women want to have this. You have this storybook, amazing, beautiful, wonderful relationship, and we all want that. So have you had to deal with racism in your marriage?
Yeah, I've had to deal with it. Definitely. I think it's been a journey for us. I think, just the two of us together, we click. We click because we honestly have the same foundations and a lot of the same experiences. But it's also been a journey of kind of educating him on a lot of these things. And also me using his privilege to get some of the things. Like, there's a reason why usually in my meetings, I got a picture of him in the background. We're planning on going to the East Coast for a couple of weeks to visit his family and stay in New York. And we're going to find an Airbnb. he already knows he needs to open up an Airbnb account and be that POC and not me. When we're looking for an apartment, the apartment we live in, or we've moved several times in the past few years, he's the person in front of me. And so when we go to restaurants, they would sit us by the bathroom, and he didn't notice it the first time, but now he knows. There's just been so many experiences where he's now had this awareness, but also we both use his privilege to get to navigate this world. But when it's just the two of us, it's one of those things where, you know, it sounds corny, where we're just two people that kind of click. But when we step outside, every time we go to Costco, or is this together? Are you together? We're together. Like, why would we not be together? So yeah.
Well, and I've had that experience. I was in a bank one time and I was in line, and some other African-American person got in line behind me, and the manager was like, "So can I help you?" And I'm like, that's a complete and total stranger. How would you feel if I said that to you? And, so people, they go through life without, I think sometimes, if they're those microaggressions, they don't notice. But so you got married in Washington, was that Washington, D.C.?
Washington,
So
D.C., yeah.
Tell us about what led you to accept that marriage proposal, and how you planned and how you executed that beautiful, amazing wedding.
I did absolutely nothing. I just showed up that day.
There you go.
I mean, honestly, it was one of those things where we were together at that point for 5 years. I was never someone to dream about weddings growing up. My dad wanted a boy. So I was very much a tomboy growing up. I never thought, I even had my dress made 2 days before our wedding day. My husband figured it out. Like, he found somebody, and we paid the package, and they said, "Where do you want to get married?" We said Union Station. We got married on June 12th, which was Loving's Day, the 52nd anniversary of interracial couples being by the Supreme Court approving that. But yeah, I just showed up that day. It was supposed to just be the two of us, but Jay made me invite our parents, so they were there. But yeah, I literally just showed up that day.
Well, if you just had that dress made, and if you all haven't checked out Dr. Lundon Jackson online, Dr. Jackson, why don't you tell us what your social media platforms are so everyone can subscribe and follow you?
Yeah, I only have the Twitter. So my handle is Dr. Lundon, DrLbundon. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm like the only Lundon Jackson, so I'm easy to find there.
Okay, well, we are so grateful to have you. We have a few more participants on our podcast, so we would love to accept any questions, comments. If you want to participate, just raise your hand, and Sharon will open up your mic. Co-host, why don't you go ahead and weigh in?
Well, I have a question for you, Dr. Lundon. Enjoying every single moment of this interview. Patty mentioned that you have you love traveling. And so I'm interested in what it's been like for you as a couple, as you've traveled abroad. How have you been received in various countries? And if you can just kind of speak to that for a moment.
Yeah, I honestly haven't traveled too much overseas with Jay. I usually go solo or with my mom, but the main, probably biggest experiences is, again, using his privilege and navigating that. Quite honestly, I've always told people that whenever I travel overseas or outside the US, that privilege of being US and speaking English is definitely something that's valued. And I bring that up because I have many friends that are from the continent. And when we see each other or travel together, there is a different reaction. So, me being with my white husband, there's definitely a privilege, but at the end of the day, it's almost the same experience if I were by myself, because I have the US passport and I don't have the accents, or I have the California accent. But I can't, probably the overt racism that I've felt traveling has been when I've been by myself and with my mother. So it's actually, to short answer, it's been a benefit to travel with him, even though it's been to like Iceland and Puerto Rico and things like that. But going overseas, it's been mostly with myself or with my mother.
Thank you.
So I saw some pictures of you and your husband. Was that in Thailand or somewhere in Southeast Asia, and you were eating street food off of skewers?
Yeah, that was probably the first experience. I was trying to explain to Jay that the first time I went to Bangkok by myself, that was my first international trip. And this was back in 2012. And I didn't understand why random people were coming to me to take pictures of me. Because when I travel, especially by myself, I wear big sunglasses because I don't need people seeing the fear in my eye, because I'm by myself and like on a different country and I don't speak the language. So I wear these big glasses, usually a big hat, very incognito. And I didn't understand why I would have, everywhere I went, it was like pictures. People wanted to take a picture with me. And at first I was like, oh, okay, they must think I'm a celebrity or whatever. But then after probably 2 days of that, I was like, I feel like an animal in a zoo or something, where it's just like, it would never dawn on me to see a random person on the street and like take a picture with them. I didn't, and so it's kind of like that experience. But looping it back, when I traveled with Jay to Thailand and Cambodia and Vietnam, Southeast Asian, I don't know, like they're very welcoming folks. But I had less people coming to me, except for the one time. There was one time we landed in the airport and someone randomly came up to me and I saw Jay's reaction. He was like, oh, that's what you were talking about. That is weird. I was like, yes, that is what I'm trying to explain. But that was just the wonderful experience. I think that was the first time he actually traveled completely overseas, like more than 12 hours away. But it was a wonderful experience. We even went to Turkey for a hot tea, and it was just a great 3 weeks that we had together.
Now, our co-host Dinaj Leto is a world traveler. What have you had experiences like Dr. Jackson's, or you've been traveling, not with another person that I know of? I think you're very brave and you've been going a lot of places alone, but you went to Dubai, you went to Italy, you went over.
Yeah. No, I've had the same experience. I can remember once in Venice, and I knew it was racism. And the thing is that because the motherland is close to these countries, you have a lot of immigrants. So when they see a Black person, they just think you're an immigrant or whatever. You just came over here from Africa to take over. So I'm walking the canals of Venice, and this old white woman walks up to me, and she starts giving me a piece of her mind. I don't know what she's saying because I don't speak Italian. And a little Shih Tzu, which I threatened to kick, but she, from her demeanor, I could tell she was giving me a mouthful. And of course, there were African vendors down the way with their wares. They'll stop on the street and they got the Rolexes and what have you. So, she just assumed. But as soon as I said, lady, I don't know what you're saying, but you better get out of my face. And she realized that was an English accent. Her whole demeanor changed, because she had just by my skin color assumed I was African. And then from the accent, even though it's Alabama, she knew I was American, and the whole affect just changed. So yeah, I've experienced that.
Yeah, same here. Same here. Can think of over in Dubai, there's a separate line for the American passport. The taxi service, the hotel service, just there is definitely almost that privilege. I almost felt, just at a higher almost like a class level.
Oh yeah, that's a different.
Um,
When you start talking Dubai, and that's a whole different.
that's right. And I was surprised. And then even in the Caribbean on some of my missionary trips, within our own people, they don't really value themselves and their own culture as much as others. And so, then there's a color, almost like the paperback test over in the Caribbean countries. And so I was sort of feeling, getting that preferential treatment. And, every time I travel, I just learned something.
Well,
do take-
and
You're not gonna tip well, so
Yeah.
and
I
That's
cousin,
true.
your husband was Zimbabwean,
That's correct.
and so did you do much traveling to the motherland? And no.
No, I did not. No, I did not. He was part of there was an election coming up. He was actually running for president, which is opposition, right? So no, thank you. I'll stay.
Now, Dr. Williams, you teach at UC Davis, among other places. Now, when your students are in your presence, do racial topics come up when you teach sociology? Are those conversations on race something that you have among your students as well? I know Dr. Jackson came up through school here in Sacramento. Your work is in Davis. It's a little different population. What are your students experiencing?
Well, sociology lends itself to conversations about race. So I always start every semester by saying this class is going to teach itself. Because on any given day or any given week, like my first assignment is not, here's the textbook. My first assignment is find an article, a clip, a video that deals with the topic of race, gender, class, or inequality, right? Write a brief and then present in class. Like that's the first assignment. Because, part of what you want to show, particularly this generation, is that on the one hand, we're still dealing with these questions of race and inequality and having them identify, right, their perspective. Now, some students will come back because sometimes Davis is a little rarefied and folks come in from very privileged backgrounds. But if it's a part of the assignment and it's worth like 20 points, they're going to do it, right? So a little incentive. But when they come back, the best thing is that you're able to scaffold, right? Oh, I see. You picked this article. Then you can layer in theories, right? Because when they start to talk about it, they really want to know why. How is it that prejudice persists and discrimination persists? And these questions about race that are often just black and white, but extend throughout the diaspora, right? Colorism, all of these key issues. How is that possible that we're still talking about that? And that, from a teacher's point of view, that's when you got them. Because they know that it's older than them and they're thinking, right, they're the new generation, they're young, they're vibrant, they're like, no, that doesn't affect me. But then you just found this article and identified something that really did touch you. And when they want to know the why, that's when you can start to educate.
Now, Dr. Jackson, do you ever see yourself as going back into the classroom?
Not as a classroom teacher, if anything, just to kind of, and I do that now, just to kind of talk about the pathways that people have that we're not exposed to. But no, I don't see myself going back in the classroom.
Not even
No.
to guest lecture for Dr. Williams, sociology. I mean, we'd love to
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you are such a unique person. I've never forgotten you from the first moment I saw you present. And you have such an impact on the people around you. And we're just really grateful that you took the time to be with us today. And we want you to be able to share that genius that you have. And we're going to get you back in front of the California legislature again. We're going to have to wrangle those members, because this content creation economy is something that just eludes so many of us. I mean, Dr. Mubaira did some research on it. I wouldn't even know where to begin to do research on it, but we all hear these kind of get rich quick overnight, 12-year-olds making $30 million a year and testing toys and all this stuff. And it just seems like our youth need more exposure to people like you so that they know what they're capable of. And I love that message from your mom, don't let them break your spirit, because that's what they do, even with the little microaggressions and the barbs and the comments and the disrespect. We want more strong women like you to be role models for our young people. And we just really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Any closing comments for our audience?
I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak to the community. It's something that I've wanted to do for a while. I've been heads underwater trying to figure myself out. And so it's nice to be able just to talk to folks and really kind of share experiences. But honestly, it just comes down to, going back to my mom, don't let them break your spirit, keep finding that path, but also be epic. That's like my motto, be epic in everything you do, everything you want, everything you aspire to do, be epic, think outside the box. And that's honestly how I got to where I'm at now. When I was 29 years old, I just wanted to take myself out to dinner. That was like an epic thing for me. And now I can say that I have done that around the world by myself, almost 60 some countries. Never thought I'd be working at YouTube. Never in a million years. I wanted to, but never thought I'd actually be here. But it's because I thought to be epic. And I let other people know I am an epic person and I don't have imposter syndrome. Do not have it.
We know that. Are we going to get to meet baby Pug today or no?
No, he's asleep. He does. He's not a morning person or morning pug.
Okay, well, we have some listeners here. Does anyone have questions for Dr. Jackson? Everybody's being super quiet. Well, we want everyone to follow us on Instagram and we've got a brand new YouTube channel. We don't even know how to find the subscribe button to put on there. So we'll figure that out. We're on Facebook and we are on Twitter. So please, if you don't have a question right now, you could go ahead and post it and we'll follow up with Dr. Jackson. And you are invited to come back anytime, Dr. Jackson. You can co-host, you could be a guest, you can make recommendations. The floor is yours, as they say in the legislature. Oh, Dr. Norris says, be epic, everyone.
That's
I
the
love
word.
that.
I love it.
Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions for Dr. Jackson, we're going to wrap up. And Sharon, you could go ahead and hit that button. And we'll look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of Conversations on Race. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be sure to look you up on LinkedIn.
Please do. I'll find you as well.
Okay. All right, Sharon.
Join us. Send us your questions. Post your comments on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter at PattyMariaMcGee.com.